my darlings, Mimi G here with another sew along as part of my Mimi G for Simplicity pattern collection. Today we're going to be working on my new spring pattern 1167, and we're going to be making view B or C, which is the shorts or the pants. The construction is exactly the same for both. The only difference is that one is a pair of shorts and one is a pair of pants. There's only a difference in length. If you're new to sewing and you need a little refresher, let's say on picking your correct pattern size, laying out your fabric, laying out your pattern pieces, cutting out your pattern pieces, a little information on working with linings and or grain lines, I suggest you go back and view the basics video before moving forward. But do not cut anything out until you come back to this video. Let's review the pattern pieces that you're going to need. If you're going to make the pants, then you're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 5 and pattern piece number 11. If you want to make the shorts, you're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 16 and pattern piece number 15. Like I mentioned earlier, there's nothing that changes in the construction of the pants or the shorts. The only difference is that one is longer than the other. So whether you choose to do the shorts or the pants, you can follow along the same exact way. You're also going to need to cut out pattern piece number 6 and 7, which is our front yoke and our facing for our pocket. And you're going to need to cut out pattern piece number 8, which is our front yoke and our pocket. This is cut out of lining. You're also going to need to cut out pattern piece number 12 and 13, which are our waistbands. You're going to be cutting those out of fabric and out of interfacing. Then you're going to cut out pattern piece number 14, which is our belt carriers. Now, before you cut out your main pattern piece, which is the front and the back of your pants or short, depending on which one you're doing, I want to show you my easy modification to doing a fly front. If you are an advanced beginner or an intermediate sewer, you can follow along with the pattern directions to do a fully functional fly front with a full underlap. But if you're like me, I like to make my fly fronts a little easier, and I learned this method a really long time ago, and it's fail-proof. So I'm going to show you how to take the pattern piece that we have and how to modify it to do the easier fly front that I'm going to show you. If you're going to be doing the full fly front with the underlap and following the directions given in the pattern instructions, you will also need to cut out pattern piece number 9 and pattern piece number 10. If you're going to be doing my method, you will not need to cut these two out, but you will need pattern piece number 9 for the following modification. Whenever I come across a pattern that does not have the fly extension on the pattern, I always add it so that I can make my easier, faster fly front method. Now this one does not have it, and so if you're doing a fully functional fly front with the underlap, then you will need to cut this out just as you see it. If you're going to do the one I'm going to show you in this video, then we do need to make one slight modification. You're going to lay your pattern piece down, and you're going to take pattern piece number 9, and you're going to lay it over the top, aligning the large circle. Once you align your large circle, I want you to pin it in place so that it doesn't shift. Once you have pinned this in place, you're going to keep it this way, and you are going to cut this out following this new guide that you have here, like I have done. Now, the only other thing that you will need to do is to cut out the same exact piece, not out of fabric, but out of interfacing. I've placed my pattern pieces, my shorts, facing wrong side up, so I'm looking at the wrong side of my fabric, and I've cut out my interfacing, so I'm going to put the wrong side of my interfacing, the little bumpy side, onto my fly front. And we're going to press this in place. Simply press and hold. If after fusing your interfacing to your fly and you don't see that little dot that we should have marked there, then just go ahead and place your pattern piece back on top of your fabric and mark the dot. You want to mark it on both sides. Now that we have modified the front of our pants or shorts, Let's go over the other items just to make sure you cut everything out. You're going to need your waistband pieces cut. You're going to need to cut out the front yoke and the facing. You're going to need to cut out your yoke and pocket out of lining fabric. You're going to need to cut out your belt carrier. And of course, we have the back of our pants. Alright, let's start with doing all of the tedious stuff first. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew our belt carriers. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold this so that they both meet in the middle, like this. And then we're going to fold it over again and we're going to press. And you're going to press this all the way down, folding so that it meets in the middle. And then folding again and pressing. Once you have it folded and pressed, we're going to sew very close to this edge. Now, of course, you should be using a thread that is as close to your fabric as possible. I'm using white so that you guys can see what I'm doing. And you're just going to keep sewing till you reach the end of your fabric. Now you're going to do the same thing on the other side, sewing close to the edge. Now what I want you to do is I want you to grab your lining piece for your front yoke and pocket, and I want you to grab the pocket facing and the yoke. And what I want you to do is I want you to pin it exactly the way you see here. Wrong side to right side. And I want you to pin both sides. Once you have it pinned, we're going to sew about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. And you're going to do the same thing on this side. You're going to sew all the way along the edge. And now we're just going to do a basting stitch here and a basting stitch along this side to keep it all in place. You're going to do the same thing to the other. Once you're done, you should have both of these completely finished and sewn, and then give it a good press. And we're going to set these aside. Now we're going to make our darts on the back of our pants. So you should have marked out your dart legs by making a snip and then transferring your dart legs and making your dot. So I'm going to pin, first aligning my little slits that I like to make. And then I'm going to pin at my dot. And then I just want to make sure that both my dart legs are aligned on either side. So I'm going to pierce through on one side through my marking and just make sure that I'm coming out in the same place on the other side. And if so, then I'm just going to pin. going to sew completely off. And then I'm just going to tie this off instead of back stitching. And I just make 2 little knots. And you're going to do the same thing to the other dart, and then you're going to press this. Now once we're done doing our darts and then pressing them, I want you to set the back pieces aside, and I want you to grab your front pieces. I want you to place them with right sides facing each other, and what you're going to do is you're going to create a straight line from the dot that we marked all the way up. Use your ruler and make one straight line so that you have a guide as we're stitching. What we're going to do is we're going to baste from the very top using a long stitch until we get to this dot. Then we're going to go to a normal stitch and continue from this dot until about 1 inch before we reach the end. Once you reach your dot, I want you to go to a normal length stitch of 2.5, and I want you to back stitch. And now continue until you reach about 1 inch from the edge. And back stitch. Now what I want you to do is I want you to snip into your seam allowance. So we have a little notch there. I want you to snip through that notch. Pretty close to your stitching, but not too close. And we're going to press this open. So I want you to press this open. Once it's pressed, we're going to leave this alone for just a sec, and we're going to attach our yoke and our pocket. So what I want you to do is I want you to align your notch, right sides facing, and pin. And then match your other notch along the side and pin. Now we're going to sew with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance along the curved edge. Now I want you to trim your seam allowance to about 1/4 inch. And now I want you to do a little bit of understitching. So I want you to press your seam allowance towards the lining, okay? Press this all the way down towards the lining. Once you do that, we're going to sew right along the edge of our facing. You want to make sure that your seam allowance is towards the lining so that you're catching it in your stitching. Now I want you to press this under. Now that we pressed it to the inside, we're going to do a little top stitching. So on the top, we're going to sew 1/4 of an inch away from this edge here, all the way down. Now this is very visible, so if you're using the same color thread as your fabric, that's wonderful. If you're using a contrasting color thread, then just be very careful because this will be very visible. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring the remaining part of our yoke over to the side, and we're going to align that notch. And we're going to pin. And then making sure everything is nice and flat. It's easier to do on a flat surface. you are going to pin across the top. And just go ahead and do a basting stitch all the way across the top to keep this in place. And you're going to do a basting stitch on the side just to keep this in place. Okay, as you can see, I have basted the very top of this so it doesn't move, and I have basted across the bottom. And now what we're going to do is we're going to close out our pocket. So I'm going to just unsnip a little bit at the bottom of this, and we're going to close our pocket, aligning your notches, and then you're going to sew 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. After you do that, you may want to serge your edge. Keep your pants free, so if you need to undo your stitching a bit, it's okay. And go ahead and finish off the raw edge of your pocket, and then you're going to do the same exact thing to the other side. Okay, we're going to attach our zipper. So what I want you to do is I want you to put all of the fabric to the left of you, and we're only working on this one fly flap that you see here, okay? And we're going to place our zipper so that the end of the zipper tape, I always buy extra long zippers because it's easier, it's just past the bottom, and I'm going to pin there. I have pinned it, and my zipper tape, the edge of my zipper tape is right on that seam line, right in the middle. And so we're going to just baste this together. You don't have to be precise. Cut off any loose threads. And now what you're going to do is you're going to turn this over like this. And you're going to press your fabric so that it's close to your teeth, kind of like this, right? And we're going to sew close to the fold of the fabric. And we're using a regular length stitch. Now what you're going to do is, and do this on a table or something flat, you want to just bring this flap all the way over so that it lays naturally flat. And you're going to pin it only to this flap here, not the pants. We're only working on our flies. So lay it flat. Try and do this. And you're going to pin. And then starting at the bottom, making sure that the rest of your pants is to the left of you. We're going to sew right around the center of the zipper tape. So you don't have to be too precise because you're not going to see any of this on the other side, but so right along maybe the center of this zipper tape you're going to sew. Cut off all those loose threads. Now we have our zipper sewn on to our fly. Now we need to turn it around, and as you can see, you have part of this flap over to the right of you, which is wonderful because we have our guide marked onto our pants so that we can create our stitching line. So first we want to pin at the top there, and I like to pin along the fly just to keep things together while I'm sewing, and then I'll just remove it when I get close to it. Now all of this, you know, is much easier to do when you're working on a flat surface. I'm only doing it in my hands in the air because I need to show it to you guys, but you should be doing this on a flat surface when you pin. Now that it's pinned, we're going to stitch following our guide. So I'm going to start at the top, making sure everything is nice and flat underneath there. And I'm going to sew following my guide. And back stitch. Cut off any loose threads. Now you have a curve. Now we can remove our basting stitch. Once you remove your basting stitch, you can open your fly. Now the reason that I have this up here, you know, I use really long zippers because I don't need this kind of being in the way. And once we attach our waistband, we can cut off any excess, but do not cut a single thing until we attach our waistband. Now that we have our zipper and pockets done, we're going to attach our back pant to our front at the inseam first. So with right sides facing, we're going to take the back of our pant and we're going to pin it to the front of our pant at the crotch. Aligning your notch, you should have a single notch there. And then also pinning at the bottom. And we're going to sew starting at the bottom using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and serge this seam, and then you're going to do the same thing to the other side. So grab the remaining pant leg and you're going to pin it right sides facing, aligning your notch, pin at the top and at the bottom, and sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you've sewn front to back at the crotch all the way down, I want you to open this up so that we can close up the back of our pants. So align that triple notch that you have and then pin at the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to start sewing where we stopped sewing at the front of our pant, right, where we stopped about an inch before the end. We're going to start just above that. We're going to back stitch to make sure it's secure, and then we're going to sew all the way through the back of our pants. I'm going to put my needle directly into the existing stitching, and I'm going to back stitch. And we're sewing 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way up. Now all we need to do is to sew the side seam of our pants. So working still with right sides facing, we're going to start at one leg and we're going to pin at the bottom, pin along the side seam, and make sure that you are aligning your notch. And then of course pin at the top. And now you're going to sew, starting at the bottom, 5/8 of an inch all the way up, and you're going to do that to both sides. You're going to pin the remaining leg the same way, starting at the bottom, align your notch at the side, pin at the top, and sew with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now you should go ahead and serge your side seams. I also went ahead and serged the hem of my pant legs, so you might want to do that. And then give this a good press on both the inseam and your side seam. Now we're going to cut our belt loops. Now you should have dots on the front of your pants where you're supposed to put your belt loops, and you should have 2 at the back, and then we're going to put 1 at the center back of our pants. So we're going to grab 1 belt loop at a time, and we're going to place it right where our dot is, and I'm going to pin that. And then we're going to sew it in place about a 1/2 inch down. And you're going to do that to the other side. I'm going to place it just over that dot. And you can either pin it or hold it in place and then stitch it down. And do the same thing to the back. And then you're going to do the same thing at the center back. Make sure that your seam allowance is pressed open. And then the last one. Now we can move on to our waistband. So set this aside and grab your waistband pieces. We're going to start with the interfaced waistband pieces, and we're going to align our notches, and we're going to sew them together left and right using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I want you to press this seam open. And although we're not going to sew it right this minute, I want you to do the same thing to the non-interfaced waistband. I want you to align your notches at the center back, and I want you to stitch it 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I want you to press it open. Now you can see that the waistband kind of curves, so you want to make sure that if it's kind of making a smiley face, we want it to make a frown. Okay, we want it to frown. And what we're going to do is we're going to align the center back, which is our stitching, to the center back of our pant at the back, of course. So we're going to pin. You should have notches there, so make sure you align your notches as well. And then you're going to continue to pin all the way along your waistband to your pants. Open up your zipper. And you're going to continue pinning until you've pinned the entire thing. Once you've pinned all the way around your waistband, you should have an extension here going past your pants. So we're going to start at one end, and we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance until we reach the other end. Now we have our waistband attached, and now we need to just add our facing. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you clip off all of these loose threads that you have, and we're going to clean up a bit. And now what I want you to do is I want you to press your seam allowance all the way up towards your waistband, all the way around. What we're going to do is we're going to sew across the entire bottom of this, making a stitching line 5/8 of an inch away from the edge. Now we're doing that for two reasons. One is we don't want this to stretch while we're attaching it, because we need to hand sew it or machine sew it in place. And secondly, it's easier to have a guide to turn under your 5/8 of an inch on the inside of your pants if you have a stitching line as a reference. So I'm going to place this, and remember we're doing it along the happy curve, not the frown. And we're going to stitch all the way around. And now you're going to press this under all the way across the bottom. Okay, now that you have pressed the bottom edge of our facing, we're going to attach it to our waistband, also starting at the center back. Now we attached our waistband with it frowning. This time we are going to attach it with our waistband smiling. So what we're going to do is we're going to align our center back seams and pin. And just follow along, pinning at your notches. And pin the remaining waistband on both sides till you're completely done. Once you have finished pinning your facing to your waistband, we're going to start at one end, and we're going to sew all the way around. Now you can cut off this excess zipper. Using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, sew all the way till you reach the end of the waistband. And what we're going to do is we're going to be sewing pretty close to the edge here. So you're going to make sure that your needle, once you get here, is at least about 1/8 of an inch away from where your fly is. And you want to backstitch. You're going to do the same exact thing to the other side. Once you're done doing both sides, you want to clip off some of this excess. You want to clip into that corner. Be careful not to cut through your stitching. And we're going to turn this to the right side. Use your scissors or a point turner to poke out that corner a bit. And now what we're going to do is we're going to understitch. So what I want you to do is I want all of your seam allowance to be facing your facing, okay? And we're going to understitch on the facing only, not on our waistband, really close to the edge. Starting as far in as you can and going all the way down until you can't go anymore. We're going to sew close to the edge, making sure that our seam allowance is towards our facing. Now I've come in as far as I can, so I'm going to stop, cut my threads. And now I want you to turn the facing to the inside, and I want you to press it all the way around. Once you have it all pressed to the inside, I want you to go ahead and pin it down because we're going to slip stitch this. And so I'm just aligning the stitching, the edge that we have here on our waistband facing to the stitching line that we have on our pants. And I'm placing it just below that line. And you want to pin all the way around, making sure that your center back seam is aligned to the center back seam of your pants and your waistband. So I have my needle and thread, and you know, there's a ton of YouTube videos on a lot of different hand sewing techniques, but this is, I find, the easiest for especially beginners to learn. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab just a little tiny bite of both the pants and the facing. Just a tiny little bite. And you're going to continue along until you reach the other side. Once you have the entire waistband facing stitched down, go ahead and give it one final press. And now we're going to finish off our belt loops. So what you're going to do is you're going to leave just a little bit, right? Just a little bit of a fold because you don't want it to pull. And then you're going to fold under, and don't worry, we're going to cut this excess off. And then we're going to stitch right at the top of this. And you're going to continue on. You're going to leave a little bit of a turn here. You just want a little bit, maybe not even less than a 1/4 inch. You just want a little loop. And then you're going to fold the rest underneath. And then holding it in place, you're going to stitch across the top. You're going to do that for all of your belt loops. Once you're done attaching all of your belt loops, you can just snip away the excess, leaving just about a 1/2 inch. Now we need to do our buttonhole, and we will need to do our hem. Now you're going to need to follow your sewing machine's manual on how to make a buttonhole because your sewing machine may differ from mine. So just make sure that you read that manual and follow the instructions on how to make a buttonhole with your machine. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the pant leg wrong side out, and we're going to press up where that fold line was, which is 2 5/8 of an inch. So if you have your seam gauge handy, mine is somewhere. Let's grab it. Okay, so I want to measure up 2 5/8 of an inch. all the way around. And I'm going to sew about a 1/4 inch from the edge all the way around. So go ahead and pin it so that you know that you have the same amount folded all the way around. And you're going to continue to do that until the entire pant leg is folded over, and then you're going to do the other pant leg the same exact way. Now that I have it pinned, I'm going to sew, like I said, about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. And then I want you to give this a good press. I'm going to turn our pant leg right side out. And you're going to press this, and then we're going to turn it over, creating our cuff. And then you're going to simply tack it down. I like to tack it down by machine. And you do this after you've pressed it. I just do a couple little stitches. And I do that at both sides. And then I give it one final press. You're going to do the same thing to both pant legs. That's all there is to it. I hope you've enjoyed this so long. Until next time, peace.